What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today we're going through my updated 2022-23 postseason predictions. We're talking division winners, wild card spots, who's going to win the Super Bowl, and of course running through the entire playoffs so you can see who I have coming in, who I have missing out, and then how far those respective teams make it. These are just obviously my thoughts. Love to have yours down below. You know, who of these fringe teams do you think gets into the playoffs, who gets left out, and then ultimately who do you see holding up the Lombardi at the end of the season? I'd love to have your thoughts. It's a conversation down below. I respond to every comment, so let's talk about it in the comments section. And also I want to make note, already punched in all the games from yesterday, Thanksgiving, so while I'm talking about it, hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving and gave you everything you needed and then some. So go ahead and jump into it, and we'll also talk about the division winners here real quick. You can see them on both sides of the screen. We'll start here on the left with the AFC. I have the Chiefs winning the West, Bills winning the East, Bengals coming away with the North, and then the South goes to Tennessee. And then the wild card teams is when it gets really tough, especially in the AFC right now. Miami 12-5, they get in pretty comfortably. Baltimore 12-5, I'm going to need to see them pick it up down the stretch, but I still have faith in John Harbaugh and crew. And then the Chargers at 10-7. Just ahead of the Jets. They may even have a head-to-head, if my memory serves, towards the latter portion of the year, and that game may dictate who is the 7, who is the 8, and who's missing out. I like both those teams, but you could at least say, even if Mike White maybe gives this team a boost, Mike White versus Justin Herbert, you're going to lean there towards Justin Herbert. But I am really irritated with the Chargers. They have such a hard time finishing games. They play so bad in the second half just in general. So, part of you wants to have the Jets in, but it's going to be a fun race down the stretch the rest of the way. And then Colts miss out pretty comfortably. The Browns actually at 7-9 with a nice run towards the end of the year from Deshaun Watson's return. Actually, that should be 7-10, so I'll have to go through that. But didn't affect our playoff standings either way. And then over in the NFC side of it, on the right side of the page, I have the Eagles winning the East, claiming the number 1 seed, then the Vikings in the North, Niners in the West, and the Bucs winning the South, the weakest of those NFC divisions. And then the wild card spots, Dallas pretty comfortably makes it, and then you get Seattle at 10-7. And then this last spot, I think it's going to come down to one of those two NFC East teams, Giants versus the Commanders. I gave the edge to the Giants. I did have that being a split regular season series, so that could also break a different way. That could end up being a sweep for one side or the other. So, the Giants could have a double-digit win record by the end of the year and would get us into the postseason pretty comfortably. So that'll be interesting to watch, but that's going to be a close battle to watch down the rest of the way. And those two teams feel kind of similar. Not the ideal quarterback situation, but finding ways to win games in a hard spot. And then the Packers at 7-10, same spot. The Lions, Cardinals all miss out as well. So now let's jump into the fun part. Let's talk about the playoff teams in and of themselves. We start with the wild card matchup, Tennessee, Miami. I think that's kind of a tough matchup for both sides, right? Can Miami come up with a nice answer to slow down Derrick Henry? And then also a revenge game for Ryan Tannehill. If he's dotting it up like he did on Thursday night against Green Bay, look out, Miami. You could be in for a little bit of a scare, but I'll take that Dolphins offense against just about anybody right now, and that has been a Tennessee secondary that has been, at moments picked apart, so I think this could be another one of those games where Tennessee, just can't keep up with Tyreek Hill and then Jalen Waddle and get picked apart across the middle of the field. And then we get to Bengals, Ravens. This one is so difficult to pick. I'll give it to Cincinnati right now. One, because home field advantage feels like it could weigh heavy in a divisional game, but then also I just trust Joe Burrow being able to move it through the air. Now you're getting Jamar Chase back. I'll take what I know versus Baltimore. It's like it's an unknown commodity right now. I think they should be better. My expectations are higher than where they're playing at, but until I see them get to that gear, I can't believe in it yet. But that being said, at any moment, Lamar Jackson can become the MVP form, and everything kind of clicks around him, and then that team can become one of the best teams in the NFL. So it can happen in the snap of a finger, but right now I'm going to take the known commodity with Cincinnati. And then we get to Bills and Chargers. Only one upset on the AFC side, but I'm going to take the Bills over the Chargers pretty comfortably. I just think, the Chargers are trying to beat the Bills, but they're not there yet. That's the simplest way I could put it. And then we get to the NFC side. Bucks, Cowboys, I think this is a tough matchup, especially given, the injuries and just what's happened to that Tampa Bay offensive line from preseason to where we are now, with Dallas's ability to use stunts, create pressures up the middle, and then Micah Parsons teeing off against Donovan Smith, who is just not that good of a tackle. He's fine, but he's not great. That's an automatic mismatch. So I'll trust the Dallas defense. This is going to be an interesting game and kind of similar to what I think is going to happen to the NFC divisional round, maybe even a conference championship. Can't remember when they match up, but nonetheless, Dallas and that offense, can they move the ball against what on paper is a pretty good defense, right? Like, can Zeke Elliott and that offensive line, can they move 4 or 5 yards at a time against what should be a pretty stout run defense? Can a player like a CeeDee Lamb be able to cook from the inside, right? Like, do they sign an Odell Beckham Jr., which, for this video and its transparency, I'm leaning towards Dallas, but I didn't really bake that into the equation when I was looking at matchups and just trying to feel out what that game could potentially look like. What does that game script turn into? I didn't account for OBJ, but especially after, Thanksgiving, it feels like it's the Bills and the Cowboys still, but every day that goes by, Dallas gets a little bit further ahead. So I anticipate him being in Dallas at this point of the season, which that much more offensive firepower, which if that's the case, can he win against, Carlton Davis or Jamel Dean, it really comes down to Dallas's offense, right? If they don't get off the ground and they only score 10 points, no matter how good that defense is, it's going to be wasted. So they're going to be able to put some points on the board. They're going to be able to score 20 plus each and every game of the playoffs, in my opinion, to make sure that they have enough comfort just in case, be able to skirt past. Because, it's something like Green Bay. The Green Bay game is a perfect example. Sometimes a good offense is just going to roll your way. And, I'm not saying Green Bay is necessarily a great offense, but they had their day, right? And sometimes that can just happen as a defense. It's variable. So need to be able to have that offensive production, and it's been hit or miss so far this season, so I'd like to see that pick up and be more consistent. It's been better over the last 2 weeks against Minnesota than yesterday against the Giants. Now, long tangent aside, let's talk about Seahawks 49ers, and this is a tough one here for Seattle, not a team that tackles all that well. They've had an improved defense, but still run defense is their bigger issue. I think it's tough trying to, as good as Tariq Woolen's been, but now you have to account for Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, who can also line up at the backfield. Christian McCaffrey, George. There's just too many answers. There's too many things to account for. So while Seattle's defense has gotten better, I think this is kind of pushing that defense to its absolute limit. And then when it comes down to the offensive side of it for Seahawks, going against D'Amico Ryans and that 49ers defense, that's tough. As good as that Seattle offensive line has been, I've been impressed with those tackles. Nick Bosa can find another gear in the playoffs, right? So this is also just a Seattle team that, Pete Carroll's been there, but a lot of these components haven't, right? Like Uchenna Nwosu, I think he might have seen the Chargers made the playoffs one time with the Chargers. Rookie and Boye Mafe, Tariq Woolen's a rookie, Kobe Bryant's a rookie. And they get to the offensive side, Geno Smith hasn't seen a whole lot of playing time in the postseason, right? So, and then a rookie and Kenneth Walker, 2 wide receivers have been there, so that's a little different. But 2 rookie tackles, it's just a different stage versus the 49ers. It feels like that entire roster's been there, done that, at least made it into the divisional round. So I'll lean on the expertise and the seniority there and playoff experience for the 49ers. And then we get to Vikings Giants. That's just, hey, sorry, Giants. This is when it was coming. But hey, I mean, if you told me I was going to have the Giants in the playoffs, in the middle or end of November, I wouldn't have believed you. If you told me 3 months ago that I was going to have the Giants in the playoffs by November 25th, I'd be like, no shot. So an impressive season all the same. Let's go ahead and move on to the divisional round now. Some fun matchups here, specifically this one. So let's start on the AFC side because I want to talk about Chiefs Dolphins. But first, Bills Cincinnati. If it's in Buffalo, I'll take the Bills there. I just think the elements can play a factor, and Joe Burrow, trying to throw through that wind and some of the colder, elements there could be a little bit tougher versus Josh Allen, who can throw it through a hurricane, it feels like. So I'll lean on that. But, it'll be interesting to see if this Bills defense can get healthy, right? Trey White's active yesterday on Thanksgiving. Can one of those 2 safeties come back, and can Jordan Poyer, get back to 100%? Micah Hyde was put on IR. Can he eventually? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But if that defense were to get back to 100%, this Bills team becomes that much more scary. But it's not a credit to Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds, those linebackers have really had career years. And Milano's already been a pretty good player. But those 2 first-round picks that were a little younger when they were drafted, Ed Oliver and Tremaine Edmonds, they're finally really hitting their stride. And that defense, even with those absences, has really been great this year. And then we get into the fun matchup here. Dolphins Chiefs. I mean, this is the Tyreek Hill revenge game. This has been, the lingering question. It's tempting to take the Dolphins here, but ultimately, if this does become the shootout, I think it can be. Tua versus Mahomes, I got to go with Pat Mahomes. So, and that's, I could change my tune on this pretty quickly if Tua wins a game like this, right? Like, this could be the year where Tua takes down Pat Mahomes in Arrowhead, and then it changes kind of the rhetoric around him. It's like, okay, no, you can make a Super Bowl run with the Tua Tagovailoa, but I need to see it before I'm going to bet on it. So I'll go chalky there on the AFC side. Then we get to the NFC end of it. Sorry, Minnesota, but, this does kind of feel like maybe where it all kind of comes to a close, and I'm going to have another upset. So I go chalky on the AFC side, upset heavy on the NFC side. I'll have the boys taking down the division rival in Philadelphia. Let's start with the 49ers, though. I think that pass rush could create some problems. It'll be interesting to see, how much time maybe Christian Darrisaw misses, and if he's back in the lineup, can he hit that stride that he was at, mid or early to mid portions of the season where he's playing like one of the best tackles in football. And I don't know. This is just this is gonna come down to Kevin O'Connell versus D'Amico Ryans, right? Which one of those coordinators creates a better game plan? Obviously Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Vikings too. But yeah, also betting on Kirk in prime time. Big postseason spot. That's kind of a tough sell for me right now. So I like a lot of what the Vikings have, and if they add, if they were the team that came away with an OBJ as that third weapon, okay, I could listen. But then on the other side, I'm just watching Mac Jones carve up the Minnesota defense yesterday, and I'm like, now when you look at this proposition and it's Debo and it's Kittle and it's CMC and it's IU, it's like, okay, well, if Mac Jones is doing that with Devontae Parker, then good Lord, I don't know what Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo are going to be able to do with those superstars at the skill position group. So it feels like a tough matchup, and one that, maybe there's just enough offensive firepower to keep this one close for Minnesota. But ultimately, I think their defense might cost them this one. But we'll see. They may get healthy in the back end, and that could change my tune. And then for Dallas and Philadelphia, I mean, this game could easily go either way, right? But like all year long, you go back to my preseason videos, the receipts are there. I've been saying Philadelphia could be this team that even wins the 1 seed, wins 13, 14 games a year. But then just like Pittsburgh 2 years ago, just like Arizona last year, these last 2 unbeaten teams each of the last 2 seasons, then get bounced in the first round. And, you get the first round bye, but I could totally see it, right? And I think this Dallas team is just as good as Philadelphia, especially as we've seen Philadelphia lose some steam, and Dallas has kind of picked it up down the stretch. It's going to come down to that Dallas offense, right? Can they move the ball against Philadelphia? And it's going to be the same thing when I'm talking Dallas and San Francisco. So we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But as good as that Philadelphia offensive line is, Micah Parsons is a game wrecker, man. And I totally trust that defense. And what does Jalen Hurts look like in this game? As much as I am a Jalen Hurts believer, this is a huge stage, and this is something we just haven't seen him in. And same thing with AJ Brown, and we've seen him kind of, he gets banged up against the Commanders, turns into a pick, then the fumble against Skull. Can he get back to his dominance? And big AJ Brown guy, so I certainly hope so. But yeah, it just feels like I like Dallas and that defense and just the chaos they can create. And if Dak's moving the ball and they're ahead of the Chiefs, that's going to be a tough team to slow down. So let's go ahead and get into the conference championship round. And yeah, obviously 2 very different situations here. I'll go with Pat Mahomes getting revenge against Josh Allen, right? The Bills win the regular season game. Now I think Kansas City exacts some revenge back at home, wins it in the postseason. But that game could really go either way. And I'm, the president of the Josh Allen fan club. He was the number 1 player on my draft board in 2018. I mean, huge Josh Allen believer. Favorite player in the league to watch. And I'm a Steelers fan. I'm not even a Buffalo fan. But that being said, yeah, I love the way Kansas City is be able to move the ball. And I mean, just Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, like the question was, would they need more? And look at that Chargers game, and it makes you almost think no, right? Like those 2 might be able to do it in and of themselves. But we also saw more Sky Moore last week. Kadarius Toney unfortunately gets hurt, but hopefully she'll be getting Juju healthy. Hopefully Toney does make that return. Man, it feels like they've kind of figured out who's what role, right? Like Mecole Hardman will come back to. It feels like they have it divvied up pretty well. And then Kelsey's kind of that number 1 target, and they've been able to ride on that. And I think that defense is going to continue to get better and better as those young guys get experience. But, I've been having hesitation about some of these young teams and other situations. So, that one could break either way. And then we get over to the NFC side. And, man, it's another game that could go either way. But I look at San Francisco and some of the issues they've had on the interior of the offensive line versus, a Dallas defensive line that loves those stunt and twists. And also, Mike McGlinchey, pretty good run blocker. Struggles a little bit more in pass protection. Micah Parsons can eat up that matchup. And I look at how they play coverage in the back end. I think that's a defense that can limit those huge plays. And then even have some pieces to be able to go mano-a-mano. Like I think Trevon Diggs versus Brandon Ayuk can be a good battle. And Deebo Samuel last year in the playoffs kind of gave him some fits, especially as a runner. I think this team just has a little bit of an extra chip, maybe, and they play a little more physical. It just feels like they played the run a little bit better. Maybe that's the Dorrance Armstrong addition, and maybe that's just the team spy and Tank Lawrence being healthier this year. There's a number of different factors here. I wish this team had a big run stopping nose, because then it would really alleviate some of my issues. But this team's going to run wide zone anyway, so big guy in the middle doesn't do a whole lot there, anyways, I suppose. But it just feels like this Dallas team plays the run a little bit more honest, and maybe that's also the safeties as well. I really like how that Dallas defense matches up potentially, being able to get a ton of pressure. And if you get pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, you're going to find at least one mistake. And if it finds Trevon Diggs' hands, it's more than likely an interception, right? It's just one of those things where I think if they put enough pressure on Garoppolo, they'll induce those turnovers out of him. And then once again, the talking point of this entire thing, which obviously you can tell I'm buying into it. Can Dak and this offense continue to move the ball? And I'm not baking in OBJ, but even like the Tony Pollard and how they've been able to use him with him and Zeke on the field at the same time. They didn't necessarily gain a third wide receiver out of Pollard, but they kind of got a half one, right? So it forces defense to play that much more honest, and we can see him as a pass catcher, like against Minnesota, right, where he's just opening the flat, finished that game with over 100 yards receiving, because he has the ability to force missed tackles, and he's so explosive and has great speed and great burst. So he's kind of that extra half receiver, and then if they do land an OBJ, obviously that takes his offense to another level, in my opinion. But I believe in Dak. I believe in that offensive line and the strides they made. They've been an efficient run game, so even when it kind of sizzles out through the air, they have the ability to kind of lean on that run game and get some chunk plays out of Pollard and Zeke. So I just think that offense is going to be able to answer the call there. I think they'll be, what this team needs, right? I'm not saying it's going to be insane. I'm not saying they're going to blow teams out the doors and they're going to score 35 a game, but 21 to 28 a game, I think this team can win a whole lot of football games at that. And I think that's what we're going to see on this postseason run. It only takes a stretch of 4 games, right? Anyways, another long tangent about Dallas aside. Let's go ahead and get into the Super Bowl. And no surprise here. As much as I do love Dallas, and that pass rush is such a tough matchup, right? And Orlando Brown Jr.'s had a down year from a tackle perspective. Andrew Wiley's not a great tackle, so Michael Parsons can do the same thing here, right? It's just Pat Mahomes, he just has that ability. And I like Dak, and cerebral pre-snap type of dude, great above the shoulders. Pat Mahomes might be the most talented quarterback to ever do it. So I got to roll with him there. This could easily beat Buffalo too. So really that AFC Championship game kind of dictates who I would have winning this game, because I take the Bills over Dallas, and I take Kansas City over Dallas. So that AFC Championship game obviously looms large in my mind. But I just look at those two teams, whether it's Kansas City or Buffalo. At their best, that offense can move down the field in, say, 23 seconds to get you in field goal range and force overtime like the Bills did yesterday against the Lions, or like Kansas City did in 13 seconds last year against Buffalo. And I think that just, there's no quantifying that, and like there's no matching that really, unless you have one of those two guys. And Dak's great, but I don't know about that. And also just the way that Kansas City's been able to find those roles for those different playmakers behind Travis Kelce when Kelce is solidified one. And then we'll look at Buffalo. Stephon Diggs, obviously that guy. I like to see more out of Gabe Davis. And what we saw yesterday on Thanksgiving, more out of Isaiah McKenzie, which was a great sign. Trying to figure out who that third option is going to be. Maybe that's Odell Beckham Jr. And then, as much as I do like Dallas, it's different when you're going against one of those two quarterbacks. And then on the other side of it, you look at those two defenses, and Buffalo, I think, is a pretty sounding, especially from a pass rush side. And Kansas City, Steve Spagnuolo, they've just been able to piece it together, figure it out. Trent McDuffie, I think, has been a great addition. But ultimately, if it were Kansas City and Dallas, I think this would be a little bit more of a shootout, just because, Kansas City's defense maybe isn't on that same exact level. But nonetheless, that's just how I see it. I'd love to have your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who do you have winning each division? Who are the wild card teams? Who goes how far? And who do you have hoisting Lombardi at the end of the year? I'd love to have your thoughts. I respond to every comment, so let's talk about it down below in the comment section. If you stuck around with this video for this long, appreciate it. Seriously, I do. Especially through my tangents. It means the world to me. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button. If you're new around here, want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.